Hello and welcome to this general election debate for Congressional District 4. This debate is sponsored by Clean Elections, the state's nonpartisan voter education agency. My name is Steve Goldstein and I'll be moderating today's debate. Thanks to a partnership with the Clean Elections Commission, the Arizona Media Association, and Bitfire Studios, we're working to make sure all 2024 debates are the most accessible in Arizona history. That means this conversation will air on a long list of local TV stations, radio stations, and digital platforms, including support from local newspapers. Our format will be a little different today. We're hosting a 30-minute one-on-one discussion since only one candidate has agreed to participate. Democratic incumbent Greg Stanton has not accepted our invitation. Instead, we're welcoming Republican congressional candidate Kelly Cooper, who we'll introduce in a moment. Transparency is critical here. That's why this conversation has been designed with input from a broad group of journalists in Arizona representing urban and rural communities. We also want to let you know that no candidate has been given advanced access to any of the questions. And with that, let's introduce the Republican congressional candidate, Kelly Cooper. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
We appreciate your time. And now you have 2 minutes for an opening statement.
Excellent. Well, Arizona, I believe that America and Arizona has a very bright future ahead of us. Today, though, we are in a very bad position. We have inflation that is at record highs. Cumulatively, we have security issues at the border and in our communities. We have generations of people that are struggling, whether they're coming out of college trying to find a job that pays the bills, or they're trying to start a family and afford a home, or whether they're retired and having to decide between their groceries and their medicine. Greg Stanton, my opponent, and it's unfortunate that he could not be here today, has supported all of the policies that have led to where we are today. And me, as a Marine Corps veteran and a small business owner in this community, I'm responsible for hundreds of jobs, either directly or indirectly, with 2 of my restaurants being in this district. My background being deployed on a very short notice to guard borders in another country are exactly what we need. I feel like I'm uniquely qualified with my life experiences to address head-on the issues that are facing us every day. I know because I live in this district. My wife and kids live in this district, and we struggle just like many of the people in this district. If it's not you, it's someone that you know that is struggling to be able to afford gas or groceries. And so with that, I want to be transparent and there for this district and this conversation so that we can make sure the voters in this district know exactly who their choices are. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Cooper, thanks. Let's start off with border security specifically.
Sure, absolutely.
Would you define it as a border crisis right now?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But I would define it as a crisis on multiple levels. I think it's a humanitarian crisis. I think that it's a drug and trafficking epidemic crisis. And I think in our communities, it's led to more crises in both healthcare, in education, and in security. If the masses of people that have been sent or encouraged to come here by the Biden and Harris administration and supported by Greg Stanton, they're coming in waves and covering over all of these other crises that you see. So 100,000 children go missing at the border. You have drugs that are killing 100,000 Americans on a regular basis. You have an epidemic of overdose and fentanyl right here in this district that I think that we can lay squarely at the feet of this administration and the policies that Greg Stanton has supported.
Do you believe there's a way to find a balance among economic thoughts, acting humanely as many Americans would like us to act, while also protecting our borders in a sense? Is there a way to package all of that together?
Absolutely. What you see from most politicians, and while you're going to see a capital letter next to my name, I put people over politics. And so what you see happening both on one side, with the constant conversation is about securing the border. And then on the other side, the constant conversation is about being able to process faster, upgrade the technologies at the ports of entry. Both things are true. There is an order of service, and so we must secure the border first. The area in between our ports of entry has to be secured so that we don't have that massive flood of people coming. We don't put people in humanitarian crises. And we allow for our Border Patrol to be able to actually do its job and not just administratively process people into the country. Then Then we can look at the resources needed to make sure that asylum claims are processed more quickly, that ports of entry are handled better, and modernization is taken care of. I'll give you an example. Last election cycle, as I talked to hundreds of thousands of voters in this district, I met a young man, and this young man had been waiting for 15 years to get his citizenship. Imagine being in limbo for 15 years. Came here legally, but is in limbo on how to get all these things done. Imagine the life that must be for someone. So it is a very challenging issue. And I think on both sides, we have to ask these questions. For my side of it, it's, well, what about my children? What about our future? And then we look at the crises for these people that are coming looking for a better life. And you say, well, how can we accomplish both things? And I think there is a way to do it. It's needs, it's merit, and it's asylum. And I think for people that are willing to work across the aisle with both parties to come to common sense solutions, we can get them.
The story you mentioned about the young man makes me want to ask you directly about the so-called dreamers.
Sure, absolutely.
They were brought here illegally, but they didn't make the choice. They were all young people. And for the most part, they're considered to be true Americans in almost every sense. It's not like let's send them back to their home country. It's a home country they don't necessarily know. How does that factor into you?
Well, I think it's the same conversation. You know, what's happened in the last 4 to 6 years is a mass influx of people that were encouraged to come here. And we're not going to have roundup squads running through our communities and rounding people up and deporting them. But they are here illegally, and I think if they've broken our laws, they should be deported. Now, the dreamers, the people that have been here for a long period of time, let's imagine a life where you were dropped into a country at 2 years old. Mm-hmm. And that's all you know. You know that culture, you know that life. And your parents might have been from Venezuela. What's going to happen to that person? Yeah. Well, I think that issue has been discussed and solved over and over again. But again, we have to solve the border issue, and then we talk about how we address those things as well. Because if we don't secure the border, then every other issue that we address, including modernization, streamlining processing, addressing the dreamers' issues, will get worse. It will get worse because the border is still open, because they hear conversations about these things happening. They're going to surge, just like what Joe Biden said from the TV stage, that you surge the border. And I don't think that's appropriate for Americans.
One more specific question about border security. Former President Trump loves to talk about the wall.
Sure.
There are many people who, some would say symbolically, go stand at the wall to show that they're doing something. But there's a practicality to increasing our technology and investing in that. I don't know how you feel about putting both of those, but would you put the wall in front of technology? Would you put them side by side? How would you prioritize that?
Well, as I said at the very beginning of this, it's really very, very complicated. So as you address some of the things that are attracting people here, I think the wall maybe becomes less and less needed. But while we're in the current situation that we're in, the wall seems like it's something that we have to have. But we can't look past what's happening as well right now. The border wall that has been built with technology. There's fiber optic cabling, live feed cameras and lights every 100 yards or so, all of which has been turned off. None of which is active today because the Biden-Harris administration has refused to activate these technologies that we continue to preach about wanting.
Major concerns about the economy generally, inflation more specifically. Do you think there are any ties between illegal or undocumented immigration with some of the economic struggles our middle class folks are facing?
Of course. Okay. Of course there is. When you have people that are coming here without a proper citizenship, proper legal right to do so, you create a burden in that society. So think about in New York or in Chicago where they're handing out different support benefits to these people that are here illegally. Well, where did that money come from? It came from your pocket. Every single one of you out there watching this, whether you voted for it or not, are paying into these systems that are supporting people that came here illegally. And that doesn't mean that we can't be compassionate. It doesn't mean that we can't have empathy and understanding for the plight of the people that want to come here. But again, it goes back to the beginning. These things have to be done through legal means. Law and order matters in our society. In fact, most of the people that are coming here are fleeing an environment that is void of law and order to try to come here where we have a stable society as a result of that law and order. So when you see the federal government passing large funding bills that are going to supplement states that are overspending their budget because they're supporting these folks that have come here illegally, you run into real significant challenges, and it has led to a lot of what you're seeing across the board today. We don't have to be an incompassionate society. We don't have to be hateful. We don't have to look out around the world and say, all of you are bad. I don't believe that's true. I believe around the world most people are good. And I believe that we should do everything that we can to try to make America the place that people envy, the place that people want to come to. But it has to be done by legal means, with law and order, and with our citizens in mind.
Let's talk big picture economy for a bit.
Sure.
Certainly, I mentioned inflation. There are still concerns about inflation, even as it's come down a little bit. But people are seeing that in housing prices, still a little bit with gas prices. And yet there are others who would argue unemployment is low, stock market is high. Again, I'm going to ask you a prioritizing question here. How do you prioritize all this to see whether people are actually suffering economically, whether they're doing a little bit better than they were a year ago? What do you want to see going forward?
Yeah, the economy is a great topic. I think it's number one on most people's minds. I, as a business owner, can tell you that 4 years ago, a case of chicken wings was $80, and today it's $140. I can tell you that a pound of ground beef was a little over $2. Today it's almost $4. That struggle is creating the inflation that we're seeing today. When I go home today, I'm going to find my electric bill. And I live in a modest 1,500 square foot house. I don't have a swimming pool. It's over $400. It's over $400. Groceries, for me and my family of four, is almost $400 every week. My gas bill for my truck, it's almost $100 every single time I fill up. And that's at today's prices. And yes, they have come down, but cumulatively from the beginning of this administration, and really over the entire term that Greg Stanton has been in office voting for these things, cumulatively, we're at what I believe to be record high. And we can say that inflation is down, and that's true if you measure it month over month or year over year. But when you measure it from a cumulative basis, people are struggling with the way things have been over these last 4 years, and they need relief. That being said, there's a different part of the economy that is about job growth and bringing manufacturing back to this district that we also have to address. Because if we don't rein in reckless spending, if we don't address the crisis of non-real, true GDP growth, we will never, ever get out of the debt that we've been put in over the last administration, the administration before that, and the current administration that is putting us $1 trillion in debt every 100 days. We have to have strong policies about reining in reckless spending to make sure that your money, your tax dollars, are going to take care of providing an environment with law and order that we can all strive to be successful. The American dream is what I grew up with. As a guy that grew up to a single mom, that worked my tail off, joined the Marine Corps, deployed all over the world, came back and went into the hospitality industry and sweat equity my way into my first restaurant ownership, and then continued to invest in that to get to the point that I'm at now. That took a lot of work. It took sacrifice. It didn't just get handed to me, and it doesn't just get handed to anybody else. But the environment that created, the environment that allowed me for me to create that American dream is dissipating. The challenges from Greg Stanton's time in office and the Biden-Harris administration, and even administrations before then, have led us to a position where the American dream is shrinking, and more people are falling off the economic ladder. They're finding themselves and their families in positions that they're unpalatable, and I don't want to raise my children in a country that doesn't provide that kind of an atmosphere. My 9 and 10-year-old deserve more, just like all yours.
Follow up on the issue of debt.
Sure.
Because debt gets, occasionally when we come near elections, you get more candidates who say, I'm going to do something about that. People who legitimately want to do something about it. And yet, I almost want to ask you, how do you get people to take that more seriously in a practical sense, that once they get to Washington, they actually work on that and not say, well, you know, I cut the level of spending we added. We only added 15% on top of the, instead of 35%. How do you get people to actually take that seriously?
Well, I think that the voters have to pay attention. So as you just pointed out, when we talk about budgets from year over year, if you're not increasing that budget, it's considered a cut. And politicians will come out and tell you that they cut spending. They didn't really cut spending. And I think the challenge that we have with that is very often, I've been to Washington, so more than I'd like to admit, people don't understand what it means to read a P&L. They don't understand what it means to balance a budget. All of you at home understand what it means to balance a budget. You have to do it at home every single day. You have to decide what you can afford to buy and what you can't afford to buy. And politicians, they don't. They're using your money. So it doesn't have the same impact or meaning to them. And they fall victim to lobbyists or legislation, policy they don't understand that leads us to more spending. I think that we have to have transparency for the American people and the people specifically in this district to allow them to understand where this money is going, why we need more money all the time, why we're not seeing reductions in spending, instead we're seeing increases. And then furthermore, if we ever want to get out of this debt, we have to talk about how we can innovate. Because if we're not innovating, if we're just taxing people to death, that's regressionary. You will never see GDP growth with tax increases. It doesn't work that way. So the more you want to see the GDP grow so we can pay down this debt, the more we have to not only address reckless spending and wasteful spending, we have to address innovation over regulation. I think that's a key factor affecting things right now.
Okay. I don't want to give you whiplash. We're going to change topics dramatically.
Of course.
We know that the Dobbs decision overturned Roe v. Wade, sending it to the states.
100%.
We know that Arizona voters are going to have a chance in November to decide what restrictions they want to place on abortion and reproductive rights or not. Let's clarify your position on this.
Sure.
To what level, what stage would you permit abortion? Would you not want abortion at all? Would you not allow it?
Yeah,
Talk on that.
It's a very difficult and challenging topic. I will tell you at my base, at my core, that I don't believe the federal government belongs in your doctor's office or really in your home. I don't think that's the case. But let me talk to you from my perspective. I have a 10-year-old daughter at home. Now, imagine a world where I'm being woken up in the morning because a politician says on an ad or their PAC, whatever you want to say, that I'm dangerous for America, that I hate women, that I don't believe that these rights should be there. It's difficult. It's difficult to be woken up by your children because an ad was put on kids' YouTube about how dangerous you are for America. The challenge of what abortion is and what abortion means, I think that's one that's unique to each individual and their doctor. I believe there is a point where the Arizona voters will decide what their tolerance is and at what point they want to be able to protect a baby. But as I just said, that's really not my place. As a federal representative, we shouldn't be involved in that. We shouldn't be legislating your doctor's office. We shouldn't be legislating your home. These are choices that you make with your family. My wife, my daughter, just like all of you out there, deserve those same choices. Now, I believe that the voters in Arizona will decide. It is on the ballot, and so all of us are going to show up to demonstrate what we believe is the right answer. But it's uniquely Arizona, and I believe that's where it should stay.
Let me ask you a caucus question, though.
Sure.
So if you were in the Republican caucus in Washington, D.C., and members of your caucus, a huge majority, wanted to fully ban abortion federally, would you stand up to them and say, I don't think I can go along with that?
That's a great question. I think this is going to demonstrate a stark and significant difference between myself and Greg Stanton. Greg Stanton is a party politician. He has voted in lockstep with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Nancy Pelosi for his entire term. He doesn't deviate from them. He votes exactly how they want him to vote so they can move forward policy to their liking. I believe that I'm here to represent you. I'm here to represent the folks in this district, the challenges they face, the successes that they have. Those are based on their hard work. And if politicians in Arizona, politicians in Washington were to ask me to vote on something, and I said this last cycle, that was contrary to what I believe the majority of the people in this district want, then I will say no. And I can tell you from polling that abortion all the way to birth or abortion never is not the majority view in this country or in this district. There is a fine balance. And in my debate during the primary, I was asked what my loyalty was to Donald Trump. And my answer is simple, and it remains the same. Donald Trump is the nominee for the Republican Party for president. And as much as I am a conservative, then that's where that lies. Mm-hmm. But my loyalty lies to the voters in this district. It lies with the families that go home and struggle every single day to make sure that they can pay their bills. It lies with the voters in this district who have to have 3 jobs, like my mom did when I was growing up, so that they can afford to have their kids in a decent school. It means your school education as a child shouldn't be defined by your zip code. And I think that's one of the great things about living in Arizona. We have school choice, and the parents can decide where and what is the best educational opportunity for their children. And I think that we should continue to foster that environment. But as I said from the beginning, as I will say now, my loyalty lies with the voters of this district, and I will represent what the majority view is in this district.
We only have a few minutes left. I want to make sure I get your views on some foreign policy issues.
Sure.
You mentioned you've been a Marine. So talk to me about what level of support, if any, you would want to give Ukraine that you would approve, and Israel.
Sure. It's a great question. It's one of those things that we talk about a lot. It's constantly questioned. I believe that we have to support our friends and allies where we can. But I am a Marine, and I have been deployed all over the world. And I am not interested in seeing what we have going on in the Middle East right now. For most of you may or may not know that we've continued quietly deploying service members all over the Middle East. There are several different battle groups out on the seas, and there are several different groups that have been deployed. I don't want my niece, who just joined the Marine Corps, who is in boot camp right now, to be deployed to some other country to handle something that could have been handled regionally. Now, that doesn't mean that we completely abandon our friends and allies. As I said, I think we, where we can, have to support our friends and allies. But I think we can also be smarter about how we handle foreign policy, and we can leverage our influence in those different regions to get a better result of support for those people. Israel shouldn't be getting attacked the way that it is. There are plenty of Arab countries in that area that want to support Israel, and the Abraham Accords fostered that environment. We should be leveraging and leaning on that. You shouldn't be seeing innocent people being killed every single day. So my answer is that it's very, very complicated, as I think you already know. And we need to be judicious about where Americans' dollars are going and where American sons and daughters are going. But we also have a presence on the world stage that must be respected. And I think our influence is important in that.
What nation or terrorist organization is the biggest threat to the U.S., do you think?
China.
Okay.
I don't think there's any question, and I don't think that's a 50-50 issue. Okay. China has and will continue to be a threat to America because of its goals and aspirations are contrary to ours. So they can never work in concert. It just doesn't work that way in competition.
One interesting item I saw on your website, and of course there are many interesting things,
Sure.
I'm just picking one. You connect homelessness and crime, but you also prioritize mental health. What kind of action, what kind of services would you be comfortable with the federal government either funding via grants or something else to help with that?
I think mental health is a major problem in our country and in our district, and it must be taken seriously. Mental health is the key factor in homelessness, in drug abuse, in almost every level of crime or the degeneration of our society comes really back to mental health. I think that there was a time where we better funded and better supported mental health facilities. I think that we should look into and return to an era where we care about our fellow citizens, where we address the mental health issues that are plaguing our nation today, so that we can start moving forward to that bright America that I described in the beginning, because right now we're not there. Right now, a lot of people talk about being compassionate. A lot of people talk about how they care about other people. I can tell you, as a servant leader that's been in hospitality and service my whole life, I've been in the service of people, whether it be this district or this country. And a lot of times those conversations or comments are met with inaction and ineptitude. And I intend to both work more closely with the state legislature to make sure that they have the resources that they need to provide the support for our own citizens in mental health distress, but also at the federal level.
Okay. I'll ask you to be brief on this one. You mentioned that you would not go along with your caucus unnecessarily on everything if it didn't work for the district. Is there an issue that you would want to introduce that would be a bipartisan issue, either that would work with the delegation or in a broader sense of the country, an issue you think that is either not being addressed correctly or should be bipartisan but hasn't been?
There's a million of them.
Okay. You got one for me. You got about a minute.
There's a million of them that we can address, that we should address. I think that most politicians use issues to just talk past each other. I think the border is the very first thing that we have to address. Okay. And I think that we can introduce legislation in the border removing the mandate requirement of applying for asylum on U.S. soil. That's a significant challenge to being able to fix some of the things that we're facing with the people flooding across the border. Why is that legislation not changed now? And I don't believe that that's a 50-50 issue either. I think that we can address that issue pretty quickly.
2022, you conceded to Greg Stanton. You called him.
I did.
Do you trust, very quickly on this, yes or no, do you trust the 2024 election will be safe and secure?
I trust that the voters of this district are going to do the work that needs to be done, and I will support the outcome of the race.
Okay.
Last cycle, we had 80,000 Republicans in this district not show up to vote, and I think that we need them to show up this cycle.
Okay. Mr. Cooper, thanks for the conversation. Time for your 1-minute closing statement.
Sure. So as we've talked about today, it doesn't matter the big letter next to my name on the ballot. What's important is that we are going to put people over politics, and we've done that my entire career in private industry and my entire time in politics. We've always looked at the challenges that are facing us today from a perspective of putting people over politics. It is time that the reckless legislation that Greg Stanton has supported, voting to keep the border open. As the mayor of Phoenix, he tried to implement a grocery tax. He has constantly voted for more and more reckless spending. And these are the core problems that have led us to the position that we are here at today. And as I said, the people of this district, many of them are struggling and many of them need help. And the help comes in the form of better legislation, better policy, and I believe that I represent that.
Okay.
Kelly Cooper will always put you first.
All right, Mr. Cooper, thanks so much.
Yes, sir.
That's all the time we have for our one-on-one conversation with Kelly Cooper, Republican candidate for Congressional District 4. As a reminder, Arizona's general election is on Tuesday, November 5th. Early voting starts Wednesday, October 9th. Head to azmedia.org to see a list of upcoming debates and where you can find them on TV, radio, and digital platforms provided by our local media partners. For the full debate schedule and to submit questions for future debates, head to azcleanelections.gov. And on behalf of our partners at Clean Elections, the Arizona Media Association, Reister and Bitfire Studios, thanks for joining us.